You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
The Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents EPIC Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host,
John Cappello.
Hello and welcome to EPIC Voyagers Radio here on the Inception Radio Network. I'm your guest host tonight, John Cappello, and I'm a psychic medium from the North Texas area, and we'd like to welcome you to our program tonight. We're going to have an exciting program. We have a wonderful guest who's going to be joining us. And if you're new to the program, we want to welcome you to EPIC Voyagers Radio. It's the Extraordinary Paranormal Investigations Council, and we invite you to go to our website, epicvoyagers.com, and if you want to join EPIC, you're welcome to do so. As if you don't know much about us, then you should know that what we do is we investigate phenomena, just different things that other people might not have the wisdom to to investigate. We try to find out if the different phenomena are hoaxes, or if they are extraterrestrial, or if they're paranormal, or just whatever. And so we do those things, and we have a group of professionals that go out and check on incidences that other investigators, or if you want to call them normal people, because we're extraordinary. We're the Extraordinary Paranormal Investigation Council. So it's a very fascinating group, and I hope that you will visit the website and go to our YouTube channel, because we have a lot of interesting speakers there, and we know that you'll enjoy the YouTubes that we have posted. So tonight we have a very special guest with us. We have Dennis Flaherty. Dennis Flaherty is an extraordinary Vedic astrologer. And Vedic astrology is very, very different. Well, I guess it's different from Western astrology. Western astrology is what we mainly do here in the United States and Great Britain, a lot of the English-speaking countries. And I'm going to let Dennis tell us a little bit more about the differences between Vedic astrology and Western astrology. I like to consider myself kind of an intermediate level Western astrologer, so I can talk shop with Dennis, but I'm certainly not at his level. But being that this is close to the first of the new year, we wanted to bring someone in who could give us some insight on what we can expect into the new year, 2015, but also educate us a little bit about Vedic astrology and the Vedic sciences, because it is considered a science in its own right. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and bring our astrologer into our conversation right now, and I want to find out, Dennis, are you there?
Good evening, John. Pleasure to be on your show.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And I want to kind of start off the program by just having you just tell us a little bit about Vedic sciences, and then we'll get to you, because I know that a lot of our listeners are interested in that investigative part of what you would consider science to be, and so if you could just tell us a little bit about that first, and then we'll back up and talk a little bit about you. So can you just tell us a little bit as to why it's called sciences, Vedic sciences?
Certainly, John. Astrology in India is considered to be one of the Vedic sciences, and in essence, we call it Vedic astrology. It goes under a number of names in the language of India. It's called Jyotisha in Sanskrit, which means light. It's often translated as the science of light, because where there is light, there is sight, and we can see metaphorically. But astrology in India exists in a very different cultural matrix of esteem than astrology in other parts of the world. For example, as far as the Greco-based astrology that comes to us from Greece, which commonly is the horoscope, which means a look at the hour, the Zodiac, which means the circle of animals, because in essence we look at the heavens and we see these various animals from the lion to the ram, etc. And within India, astrology has a very special distinction. It is very culturally esteemed, where it's known as what is called Vedanga. Vedanga means one of the holy limbs of their Bible. They have 4 Bibles that are called the Vedas. And there are 6 different limbs of the Vedas, and each one of the limbs of the Vedas give it motion, as our limbs allow us to grasp light or to move. And each limb of the Veda is a portion to a certain part of the human body. And Jyotisha, or light, is a portion to the eye. So it's often called the eye of the Veda because, of course, it is the eye that allows us to see. So I want to say in India, astrology is deeply esteemed, and it's in a matrix of esteem where people consider it to be a spiritual or a holy science, if you will. It has other sister sciences, in particular Ayurveda. Ayurveda means the Veda of Aryu, of life. It's often called the science of life. And Ayurveda is very, very old. It's the healing system that comes from India. But in the consciousness movement, Ayurveda divides people up into different kind of inventories. I mean, just like we have modern psychological inventories that say, whether a person is, an extrovert, an introvert, etc. The inventory of Ayurveda has what are called these 3 doshas, or these 3 conditions. People are pitta, or fiery. They have a very quick intellect. They're vata, or airy. They're very fast and diversified. They're kapha. They're stable, but they tend to be a little bit slow. So again, astrology, or Jyotisha, has a sister science in the science of life that is known as Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. Today, most Westerners are very familiar with yoga and the consciousness movement of yoga. And yoga in India is considered to be a darshana, which means it's a philosophical point of view in the consciousness movement. So the Vedic sciences tend to be consciously oriented: Jyotisha, Ayurveda, and of course yoga. And everyone shares the same consciousness movement, and the same consciousness movement in these sciences is really the consciousness movement of what we call liberation, or moksha, or enlightenment. And so that's what we mean by the Vedic sciences. And then people are also familiar in the West with geomancy, or what we call feng shui, and that is called Stapajaveda, or Vastu. It's orientation towards our environment, of how we can maximize environmental influences. As we orientate towards the east, we're going to see sunrises. As we orientate towards the west, we're going to be sunsets. And so that is another one of the Vedic sciences. So what's interesting in terms of Indian astrology is it is in this cultural matrix of connectedness with other sciences, so it doesn't kind of stand alone as superstitious or kind of fortune telling that many times astrology has been relegated to. In fact, the Chaldeans, or the Chaldeans as they're called, were great astrologers, and the word that comes out of that is charlatan. That the astrologer is a charlatan. There is some sleight of hand. So I could take you to New Delhi tomorrow, and I could introduce you to one of my colleagues and associates, Dr. K.S. Charak. And Dr. K.S. Charak was chief of surgery at Indira Gandhi Hospital, and a very well-known astrologer and author. And just in the West, you wouldn't find too many astrologers becoming chief of surgery without some controversy culturally of like, would this really be the proper person for the job? But in India, because astrology is esteemed, there is no division. A person can be an MD or a doctor, in Dr. Charak's case, chief of surgery, and astrologer in the same breath, and it's not controversial because, the joke in India is there's a guru on every corner. So, in essence, it just comes out of a culture where it is very esteemed and seen, if you will, as a spiritual discipline.
Wow. Well, I guess we have a little bit different perspective of science, but it's like what you just were saying. You have many people who are schooled in the medical field and in other fields who are in what we would consider traditional scientific disciplines. But Vedic astrology is more of an intellectual or a conscious type of science.
There are two. You're very correct, John. There are two aspects to it, which is there is the scientific element of it because it is based upon observation, which means it's empirical. And so there are 6 limbs also to Jyotisha. The first limb is what is called Gola. Gola means observation. It is based upon an observation of the heavens. The second is Ganita. Ganita means mathematics. You have to calculate a chart. All of us astrologers calculate a chart a certain way. And so there is a scientific element of it in the calculation of the chart to draw up a chart of time and space, because really the study of astrology is the study of time and space. And that is very empirical, and that's very scientific in terms of where a person was born, what time were they born, what constellation was rising in the east, what constellation is at the zenith or even the midheaven of the chart. These are all astronomical calculations that are scientifically based because, we want to know where we are oriented to the heavens. That's the scientific part of it. And there's no fudging in that. It's like we all have a particular science and Mathematica dicta that we follow. Where the art form comes in is the interpretation. Okay?
Yes.
That is the artistic element, although we might be seeing, we may all agree on a particular delineation of the chart, what constellation is rising, where this planet is, but our interpretation or our judgment of it is different according to our consciousness. So there's a scientific, empirical method in it, which is you got to draw up the correct chart. If the chart isn't correct, there's no sense interpreting it. But the art form comes in interpretation.
Well, I think that that's why we call it a practice. And even when you are a scientist, like a doctor, you only practice medicine. There's no definitive way to do anything exactly because you practice it. So I think that's a term. Of course, I'm not trying to equate the medical sciences to what we're doing or what of astrology, but like you said, there is an empirical. There's a there are definite ways of mathematically calculating astrology and different aspects of it. So it's quite fascinating, and I know that I have been interested in astrology all of my life. And how did you become acquainted with Jyotish or Vedic astrology?
Well, I've had a lifelong interest in astrology, and as a young man, I was able to go to the local library. Very few books on astrology, and principally were able to get Evangeline Adams books on astrology, and even some of Zolar's predictions as a young man when I was in my teens, because that was what was available. And I very much started my practice as what we will call a Western astrologer, using the tropical zodiac in the mid 80s. And we all stand on the shoulders of other people. And one of the shoulders that us Western astrologers that came into Vedic astrology stand upon is my colleague and associate, James Braha. And James Braha, in 1986, really wrote a breakthrough book called Ancient Hindu Astrology for the Modern Western Astrologer. And what he did in that book is, for us Western astrologers, he really got past some of the pejorative, predictive elements of Vedic astrology and laid it out in an easy-to-follow dicta. And many of us at that period of time who had an interest in Eastern thought, in essence, started to explore the astrology of India. Now, the astrology of India goes under many names. Some people call it Hindu astrology because India primarily embraces Hinduism. Some people call it Indian astrology because it comes from India. But I am among the group of people that call it Vedic astrology. And one of India's great gurus, Muktananda, who brought Kashmir Shaivism or Siddha Yoga here to the West, was asked by his astrologer, Chakrapani Ulal, what should we call this? Indian astrology, Hindu astrology? And basically Muktananda said, this astrology comes out of the Vedas and it belongs to everybody. It isn't just Hindu, it isn't just Indian. The Vedas belong to everybody, so we'll call it Vedic astrology in terms of its universal appeal. So you'll see this called Hindu astrology, Indian astrology, Jyotisha, the Hindi version Jyotish, but many of us choose to call it Vedic astrology, and that's what I choose to call it because I really believe it belongs to everyone.
But aren't there two systems though in India, a northern and a southern?
Understand, there's a wonderful mythology that is rich in Indian astrology, like the Greek mythology that we're very familiar with here in the West. And there's a wonderful story about how Saturn had actually cursed astrologers that none of them would agree with one another. And so the Indians have as many different forms of astrology and opinions as we do in terms of how to interpret and draw up the chart. But yes, there's a North Indian style that uses a particular kind of square chart that is house-based, that is very indicative of the astrology of Kepler, and Europe, it has European influences, and then southern India has what is called a sign-based system. But the Indians have as many differing astrologies as we have in Western astrology, and as many opinionated people. So we're all quite an opinionated lot about what we're really interested in, and we attribute that to the great curse that Saturn placed on us, that none of us would agree with one another.
Well, but you use more of the southern style. Is that right?
I'm a southern man like you are, John, in my approach to life, and I was taught in a southern style like my peer and colleague and one of the greatest teachers, Chakrapani Ulal, who came from southern India and came from Kerala. So I'm trained more in the southern style. I like the southern style because it is sign-based as opposed to house-based. But, I was at a conference most recently because I was one of the first astrologers, in the early 90s to really embrace both systems and utilize both systems in my work. And I was asked, well, who makes a better astrologer? A Western astrologer or a Vedic astrologer? And from my point of view, it is the astrologer that makes the discipline come alive. It's not the discipline that makes the astrologer come alive. And in essence, we're all Western astrologers because we're taking the astrology of India or the Greeks or the Babylonians, but we're practicing it in a culture and in a time of Western social mores to the needs of our people, which is, not the needs of people thousands of years ago. So technically speaking, we're all Western astrologers. We're practicing astrology in a Western culture. Mm-hmm. And from my point of view, good astrologers, irrespective of which system they use, get invariably good results, and bad astrologers, irrespective of what system they use, invariably get bad results. So a lot of it has to do, I want to say, with the skill of the astrologer. Like the artist, an artist has a palette with so many colors on it, but it's the artist that makes that come alive in terms of their interpretation.
Mm-hmm. And you're one of the best, so we know that's why I wanted you to be on the program.
I'm one of the more opinionated ones. I have Saturn's curse on me as well.
Well, I know I have a lot of that in my chart too. Yes. You know my chart well.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask you now. The thing about it is we've talked about different systems, and a few weeks ago I was trying to explain some of the differences between Western astrology and I'm going to call it Eastern at this moment, but they both started out about the same time, about a little over 2,000 years ago, and both systems were essentially identical as far as placements are concerned. And what I was going to ask you, if you could kind of explain the differences or how the differences arose between the two systems, and then that will help give our listeners a foundation, because if they see that they are an Aquarian, so to speak, in the Western system, and then find out that their sun in the Eastern system is in Capricorn, they might that may raise some eyebrows to some people, but there's actually a very logical explanation of that, and I was hoping that you might share that with us.
Certainly. The roots of Indian astrology first appear in the Rig Veda. And in essence, this is where there are what we call lunar asterisms or nakshatras. And to be a priest within Hinduism, you want the moon to be in a particular placement. So part of the study in Hinduism is really the study of where the moon is, where the planets are. In fact, the law of karma is deeply ingrained in Indian astrology, and I will talk about that as we progress. Mm-hmm. But many pundits and researchers, such as my colleague and friend David Frawley, who has written many books on Indian culture, believe the timing of the Rig Veda goes back over 5,000 years old, because it was an oral tradition before it was written down. Many things were passed on in the tradition of Shruti, or what is called the oral tradition, before things were written down. And one of the many times when people ask me what I do, I tell them I am a time management consultant. That's what I do. Because in essence, the study of astrology is the study of time, and it is the study of space. And most modern people, through no fault of their own, due to our contemporary calendrical distortions, don't really know what time it is. They believe time is linear, moving in a straight line, and they believe it's all equal. And then, God bless them, they have notions of progress, productivity, and destination attached to it. A classic example is we're doing this show on December 29th. If you know your Latin prefix is des means 10. Mm-hmm. How come this is the 12th month?
Right.
So, in essence, our calendar ain't what it used to be, and in the West, the civil calendar is deeply challenged, where every 4 years, we have to squeeze another day, into the calendar to kind of rectify it. India has a very different calendar than we do. They have what is called a solar lunar calendar that is based upon the dance in the sun and the moon. So in the West here, where we celebrate our birthday when the sun returns on the day that we were born. In India, they celebrate their birthday in the month they were born, when the sun and moon are in the same placement they were in the sky when they were born, because they have a different calendar than we have. The Indians and most astrologers in general, John, believe that the true nature of time is not linear. It is actually circular or cyclic. That's why sometimes this is called, the round art, and we use a round calendar, which is a calendar that repeats itself. And I always like to quote, the great Mark Twain that said, history never repeats itself, but often it rhymes. So we want to know the nature of the periodicity or time we're in. Archetypally in India and in many cultures, time is divided up into the journey of light and the journey of darkness. This happens on a daily basis because the Earth turns on its axis, creating the phenomena of light and dark. That's why this is, not just figuratively, but literally the science of light. And during the bright part of the day, when the sun is shining, it stimulates our endocrine system. There's a lot of activities that generates, and during the dark part of the day, we sleep and go into repose. Witness that we are north of the equator. India is north of the equator. We plant in the bright part of the year. So India divides the year up into a bright part of the year and a dark part of the year, with different festivals and different holidays to orientate people to the period of time that it's in. And this is hard to believe, but there's only 2 equal days a year. Those are called the equinoxes, when light and dark is balanced all over the planet. Every other day is inequitable. So their calendar measures that cyclicity or that cycle. In India, people are named after the planets. Tara, very common name, means star. Chandra, very common name for woman, means moon. Ravi, a very common name for men, means sun. So their spirituality or their religion is connected to the heavens and kind of a knowledge of the heavens. And the big confusion comes is that the astronomers of India and the astrologers of India utilize what are called the Siderial Zodiac, which is it takes into consideration precession of the equinoxes, which means that the Earth wobbles on its axis, and its axis points to a different fixed star, and it precesses what we call westward 1 degree every 72 years, which means that our orientation towards the fixed stars out there changes by a degree every 72 years.
It moves backwards, is that right? It moves.
It regresses. It regresses, and so this recessive quality or regressive quality. Think of your hairline. Think of where your hairline used to be when you were a young man, but it suffers from recession, right? And what happens is it's 23 degrees back on your head. The hair's not where it used to be, so you have to adjust the comb to comb, to do the comb over that you didn't have to do when you were a younger man. So in that regard, Western astrologers use the tropical zodiac that doesn't take into consideration recession, and we use the sidereal zodiac, which takes into consideration recession.
Now that also means that the Indian astrologers actually use the exact placements of the planets that astronomers would use. Versus
it is said to be more astronomically correct.
Yes.
In the eyes of some people, because astronomers will often point out that Western astrologers are not basically looking where the heavens are now. But you have to understand that basically the planets the constellations only regress basically a degree every 72 years, which means you'd have to be looking at the heavens for 72 years to pick up a difference. So that difference adds up over time, but the real challenge comes in is that as we translate the names of the signs in the constellations, so the Western astrologers use the signs, we use the constellations. That's why we're often called constellational astrology. But the translation of the names of the signs and the constellations, which are different phenomena, translate the same in English. So that creates a great confusion, where, like, if we use the original Sanskrit names for the constellations, like, for example, the constellation of Leo is called Simha. Think of Simba in The Lion King, and kind of a derivation of it. So if we use that, we'd be using that vernacular. And if we use the original Greek, for the signs or whatnot, we'd see them as being different. But something is lost in translation, which is the constellations and the signs translate to the same English words, which becomes very confusing to people. And therein lies the confusion, where people that have identified with one system of astrology feel like they've lost something in another system of astrology. Like, for example, if you were invested in Russian rubles right now on the global market, you would have felt a great sense of loss as far as dollars are concerned.
Yes,
so
that's true.
That's the sense that many people feel because they identify with a particular system of astrology. The translation of the name is the same, but they realize it's not the same identification. So again, they're feeling they're losing their sun sign. But in India, what is more important is actually the moon sign. They want to see where the moon is, because they have a lunar calendar, and we have a contemporary civil calendar that's already pretty trashed. And so their calendar has more to do with what is called the relationship between the sun and the moon.
Well, and that's significant because the cycle of the sun is a 1-year cycle, whereas the cycle of the moon is a 28-day cycle. So even though people may be born in different months, they could be born under the same moon. Is that right?
Yes, it's all about cyclicity or cycle. And so in that regard, things that are similar have a quality of things that are similar as opposed to things that are different. And again, the periodicity of the cycle of the Earth moving around the sun, which is from our point of view looks like the sun's moving around the Earth, that's a year. So the sun appears to move through all of the constellations in a year period of time. The moon moves through all of the constellations in about 27 and a third days. And again, all of us astrologers hate fractions, so they round that off to 28, or they round it down to 27. Okay, and the synodic cycle of the moon, that's new moon to full and back again to new, is 29.5 days. That is the derivation of a month. So a month is 30 days because they round that off to 30. Now, some months have 31. For example, July and August have 31 because they are named after the namesake of Julius and Augustus Caesar, and they wanted the longest month, so they actually stole the days from February to make the months of their namesake longer, and then that leads to the man-made phenomena of a blue moon, because that means now if in the 30-day cycle you're going to get a new moon and a full moon, now if you've made 31, eventually you're going to get 2 new moons or 2 blue moons in a given month. It's all a man-made contrivance that has nothing to do with the heavens, okay? Like imagine if we all of a sudden arbitrarily decided to change the freezing point of water, right? Just so we could save money, right? Water would still freeze at that point. But people would be, saying, why is it so cold here? Because in essence it would no longer measure what it was supposed to measure. So most of our contemporary calendars today are just deeply distorted, and because of that, people get caught up in the linear equal paradigm of time where they actually believe they're progressing, they're moving forward. They have notions of progress and productivity that they should do in a given moment of time. But nature grows very quickly in the light and very slowly in the dark. And, again, in contemporary times, many people believe all time is equal. Not all time is equal. That's why we plant in the bright part of the year, we harvest in the dark part of the year. And so, again, India has just a very different calendar to mark kind of where we are in time and to mark birthdays than I want to the distorted civil modern calendar.
Well, we live in a day and age where it seems like every other day there's a new update. Our technology has kind of taken over our lives, and we are constantly marking change, but yet we still have virtually the same calendars. The Earth still moves around the sun at the same period of time. We still have these periods of light and dark, and we have the spring and the winter equinoxes and things like that. And the ancients weren't so stupid that they didn't notice those things, and so. From my perspective, they needed something that would help them with the harvest and help them with planting and help them be able to make decisions on planning and what they were going to do. But
absolutely, that's why we love the harvest moon. In the fall when it's at perigee close to the Earth, because it means you can stay out, late and harvest. But today, we have the harvest sodium lamps. Mm-hmm. So that in essence we've been able to create artificial light so that we can make it look like it's daylight, but it's not daylight. You turn those lights out.
And it's still dark.
It's still dark. So that's right. Part of the illusion. That's part of the illusion.
But one of the things that I think was quite amazing for the ancients all over the planet and the different civilizations was that they were able to discern the planets from the naked eye. Yes. And from the vantage point of the Indian astrologer, they could see all the way out to the planet Saturn at one point in time. Yeah. Now, because of the lights of the city and the lights that we encounter, you can't see. It's very difficult to imagine seeing Saturn with the naked eye. I mean, I guess you still can from places that don't have a lot of light. That's blocking your vision, but they seem to notice that when these objects in the sky, I'm sure at the time, the planets were in particular positions, that certain tendencies would occur, and that's also fascinating. And so Western astrologers have taken it to the point where once the telescope was able to identify additional planets out there, the Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Well, it's not considered a planet anymore, but other objects in the sky, they could make additional observations with those planets. And it's also interesting that the ancients, of course, they were polytheists, and still the Hindus remain polytheists. They assigned different characteristics to the constellations, and I would imagine they transpose those characteristics to belong to the people that were born when the planets were in the position, those different positions in the skies. So they tried to create some sort of logic to what they to life, and some type of explanation as to why the universe worked the way that it did. Does that make sense?
It's really a study of history, and the Indian calendar is over 5,000 years old. Our contemporary civil calendar is not that old. I mean, it was reformed back around maybe 1917. So in essence, there is a great history of what has come before in India, and really the study of astrology is the study of cyclicity and periodicity. It's called the science of light, and so what people are interested in, Indian astrologers are interested in the planets that fall within the spectrum of white light. White light is considered to be very auspicious. Light expresses itself, here's where we get into the scientific element, in wave and particle theory. And basically in wave theory, observable white light is about, I think, 350 million megahertz. It's a real narrow band that we can see. And like in the famous experiment of Newton, if you will pass that light through a more perfect instrument than the human eye, you will see that it variegates into the 7 colors of the rainbow. And in essence, Indian astrology recognizes 7 planets that fall within the spectrum of light. Saturn is the end of light. Even light has a limit, and it's the last planet that reflects that light. Beyond Saturn, Indian astrology recognizes a category of several other planets, innumerable ones, but they're called non-luminous. Yeah, they're non-luminous. They're not in the light. And Neo-Vedic astrologers like myself, we utilize the outer planets, but they're just in a different category. They don't fall within the spectrum of light. And so we are interested in that spectrum of light because that spectrum of light makes all organic life grow, and it also makes our consciousness grow. So that's why this study of light and the influence of light upon consciousness and organic matter. Now, you can take your plants, you can bring them indoors, and you can put them under your incandescent lights, and they will die because it doesn't have that spectrum. So they're interested in that spectrum. And again, there are non-luminous planets and shadow planets that only have partiality of that spectrum, but they're interested in the full spectrum planets, and Saturn is the end of that. So a lot of people think, that, again, Indian astrology is that they didn't recognize, Uranus or Neptune or Pluto, and today, they're trying to degrade Pluto into some other vernacular or whatnot. No, they recognize a number of non-luminous planets, but they're just in a different category because they're non-luminous.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do they also use the asteroids like some Western astrologers do?
There's a lot of particulate out there in the heavens, and each different astrologer uses a different aspect of that cosmic particulate, if you will. And what's wonderful about the diversity in kind of our community is that we all kind of utilize, we all have, again, certain things that we look at that are different, but yet we all, good astrologers, come to the same conclusion, if you will. So, in essence, there's just a number of non-luminous planets that are to be utilized, but they're not to be utilized in the same scope because they don't fall within the spectrum of light. They're what are called non-luminous, and this is called the spectrum of light. So each one of the planets also has a color, and that color is associated with the planet and its influence as well. And so Indian astrology, again, in its connection to Ayurveda, this is long before, red dye number 3. They recommend certain colors of certain foods. I mean, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but what it does is it has that spectrum of light, and so it nurtures us on a particular level.
And this is all, very fascinating, and I think that one can see how you can devote your life to the study of Jyotish, of astrology, based on all of the nuances and all of the combinations and all of the placements of the planets. And if you just joined us, we're talking to Dennis Flaherty. He's president of the Council of Vedic Astrology. This is his 3rd term as the president of the Vedic Astrology Association. Before we go on, Dennis, can you just tell us a little bit about the organizations that you're a part of, the Council of Vedic Astrology? Can you tell us a little bit about them? Because I know that you offer classes, and there's actually university degrees that are offered for astrology. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, and we'll get back into our discussion. I just wanted to give people a little bit of perspective about how this profession is very grounded and very, very much a part of people's lives, and I know that you've devoted your life to it. So please tell us about that.
The Council of Vedic Astrology, which is known as CVA or SIVA, is the oldest membership educational organization in the West. It was founded in 1993. I've succeeded David Frawley, who was our past president, as president of the CVA, and we were both one of the original 7 founders of the organization. It is a membership organization because Astrologers need a home and need a sangha and need a group of people, in essence, to collaborate with, because, again, there's a lot of isolation in being an astrologer in our culture. And so we offer a home for astrologers on a professional and also on a hobbyist level. The CVA has an ongoing certification program that sets up standards of certification, and we offer our standard or our degrees of people that are willing to take our exam and want our stamp of approval in terms of knowing the fundamentals of Vedic astrology. We are an organization of polytheistic members, not schools. We don't represent any one school. We represent all schools. So we're like a great melting pot where, again, astrologers from different Indian traditions with different opinions, we all agree on core fundamentals, and in essence you can study Vedic astrology, and then once you have studied with a particular recognized practitioner within our organization, you can take our certification exams and you can become a professional member of our community. We put on conferences that are educational in nature. We just had our 20th anniversary conference this past summer in Seattle, and part of our dicta is we like to do our conferences in professional first-class hotels to bring astrology before the public in a professional atmosphere, to show that we're as professional as anybody else that is out there. So that's part of what our organization is involved in, and I've just been proud to be involved in that pretty much the last 20 years, and I'm the current president of our international organization.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people get upset with astrologers. They associate astrology, like with any other, with a lot of other professions, as doing something that's inappropriate or evil, especially in the United States. What do you say to people like that?
Well, the kind of astrology that they're against, we're also against. Because people have a misunderstanding of astrology, and again, one of the elements of Vedic astrology is deeply humanistic, because Vedic astrology really understand in Indian culture and in Hinduism, the Hindus are a lot like the Christians in that the Christians believe in the resurrection that will come on the day of judgment. The Hindus believe that you will resurrect, but you just won't resurrect with this body. You'll resurrect with another body in another period of time. And the goal of Hinduism is there's better places to be than here. So there's a doctrine of samsara. It just is interpreted as reincarnation. It's remarkable, but a good 70% of Westerners profess some belief that, in that deja vu experience that we've all been here many more times than you truly would care to remember. There's been documentations on reincarnation. But again, you're going to reincarnate, but the goal of Indian astrology and Indian culture is to really transcend. It's to get out of here. There are better places to be. And again, within Christianity, we're all going to resurrect in a far, far better world, than the temporality and the corruption of this world. Vedic astrology is about karma. All karma means is action. And each one of the planets has an action, and in its time or its cycle or its season, it acts according to its nature. Again, the great majority of people in the world are determined by the environment they're in. Environment determines consciousness. And it's the goal of astrology in India to basically have consciousness determine our environment rather than be victims of our environment. The goal is very humanistic. The goal is to understand the karmas that have been allotted to us. And basically, in the period of time, these karmas will come to fruition and they will bloom. Some of them we consider to be good, some of them we consider to be bad, but from the Indian perspective, it's all good, okay? Because when you experience your karma, your choice is how you're going to experience it, how you're going to transcend it. And so the goal of this is to experience your karma and to liberate yourself from your karma. I was just I was just listening to an Indian pundit. He was a PhD physicist, and he said, we all have free will, but we only have free will in the context of what we've experienced. Outside of what we experience, there's no free will. Mm-hmm. So when you experience the karmas of the planets, we consider for good or bad, you become exposed to what they represent. These are the seeds of your karma, and when you experience them, ultimately, in your consciousness, you now have become familiar with them, you have choices around them, and you're going to evolve. Mm-hmm. So the astrology of India, although it's called predictive, and many times astrology is called prediction, it is not predictive. It's deeply humanistic. It's protective. There's a great quote out of the Veda which means to avert the danger to come. So the goal of astrology is if someone is driving towards a cliff at 60 miles an hour and the cliff is basically 60 miles away, we can predict they're going to go over the cliff in an hour. But for the humanistic Vedic astrologer, there's an hour to change that trajectory so the car will not go off the cliff.
Well,
so
now,
the humanistic.
Well, now the thing about the value of getting your chart or knowing your chart is knowing the placement of the planets in your chart and knowing what tools you have to work with in order to utilize your freedom of choice. Would you say that is a good analogy, or
that is an excellent self-evident analogy. You bring your consciousness to your karma. The better consciousness you have, the more opportunity you have around your karma or around the events. So it doesn't make any difference whether the events are good or bad, except on an external level. It's how your consciousness interacts with it. And that's why two people can be exposed to the same phenomena, but the person, I want to say, with more light in their consciousness will be able to get more out of that than the other person did. Mm-hmm.
Well, what I want to do is I kind of want to set up our second hour that we're going to have with you, because we're going to be talking about 2015 and where the planets are going to be. And so basically, once we know where the planets are, how to use that energy that will be present next year to our advantage. And that's why people go and get a reading from someone like yourself, because they want to know the placement of the planets in their particular chart, or where they're going to be, and how they can make the most of it. And so we're going to be talking about several planets, I'm sure, but I guess your favorite and my favorite is the planet of Saturn. But I would like for you to just tell us a little bit about Saturn, because we're gonna go to a break here in a few minutes, about 10 minutes. But I'd like to spend some time talking about what these energies mean, and have you explain to us the placement in our chart and how we can use these energies to our advantage. Can you just tell us a little bit about Saturn, maybe where it is now and what it's doing now, and how we can use that to our advantage? Does that make sense?
I'd be happy to talk about Saturn. In essence, Saturn has just changed constellations from the constellation of Tula, which is Libra, to the constellation of Scorpio. So he just entered in the sidereal system, the constellation of Scorpio, on November 1st of 2014. I will talk about the last time he was in Scorpio. I think you will be quite interested in that. And just the issue with Saturn is, in India, Saturn is considered to be the Sat Graha. Sat means true, and Graha means planet. He's the planet of the truth. And just the issue is, if you're interested in the truth and the way things really are, Saturn's a great planet for you. If you're not interested in the truth, he tends to be problematic.
Well, sometimes we don't like to know the truth.
And so, in essence, Saturn is associated with the limits of life, because remember, he represents the limits of light. Beyond Saturn, we cannot see with the unaided eye. There are no light. We need other instruments to see in that regard with our human eye. So beyond Saturn represents the unknown or the darkness, and a lot of people have an unnecessary fear about the darkness that's very primordial. And so Saturn can represent the fear of the unknown. But as I like to say, I mean, if you're up on your scaffolding working on your home and you're off that scaffolding by a quarter of an inch or 2 feet, gravity isn't just a good idea that is going to be suspended for you. Gravity is the law. And in essence, you're going to come down to Earth with a thud. So Saturn represents the truth and the way things are. And just the big dilemma around Saturn kind of existentially couched is that Saturn is interested in eternal truths in an ephemeral world. And so the whole issue is what has durability? What is an eternal truth? And many times what Saturn shows us is we thought something was going to be true for a longer period of time than it actually was. We might have believed that love was going to be forever, and we found out that it was temporal. When I come to Saturn, and in terms of the predictions, is the last time Saturn was in the constellation of Scorpio was from December of 1984 to basically December of 1987. And that's when oil crashed 30 years ago. People thought oil was going to be onward and upward, and it went down to $10 to $12 a barrel, and it really shook up a lot of the budgets in oil-producing states. Saturn is back in that same placement. Look at where oil is, relatively speaking, much as it was 30 years ago. Again, as Mark Twain said, history never repeats itself. Often it rhymes.
Well, that's just true, and I tell people when I look at Saturn in their chart, I say, look where you were 30 years ago, and see if you're facing similar issues then as you do now. And so the cycle of Saturn is 29 and a half years, and from the Western perspective. And,
same periodicity. We just see it we just look at it differently in terms of the constellations than what are called the signs. But the periodicity of all of the planets is the same. The planets are all the same planets. It's just Eastern and Western astrology has a different vantage point on them, but all of their cycles are the same.
And so the first, if you want to call it, midlife crisis somebody may have in their life is at the age of 29 and a half or 30. And then the classic midlife crisis time is usually 58, 59, and so you see a lot of life changes in people when they face the Saturn at those time periods. At least that's been my experience. I don't know if you see it that way as well.
Well, for those for those that I want to say are interested in seeing things the way they really are, not the way they want them to be, Saturn is a great planet. If you're attached to things being different, then Saturn is going to be your big wake-up call. The December Atlantic Journal has a wonderful article called The Real Roots of Midlife Crisis. And it says it's not what you think, and new research starts to show you get happier at 50. So the issue is many people, as they get older, will get wiser, and Saturn represents the proverbial grapes that will turn to wine. And, and once you've got that good Merlot, you want to find the right kind of people that know what that Merlot is and drink it with. But the negative shadow of Saturn is the proverbial grapes that go sour, which is you thought it was going to be this, and you wake up and it's sour grapes. And so that's the negative aspect of the planet. Every planet's got a positive and a negative aspect, and for every proverbial, vintage of wine, there's a couple of sour grapes out there as well. So that's both sides of Saturn.
Well, usually by the time people are 50, they learn to go with the flow of life as opposed to fighting it. And that may be because they've just learned their limits, which Saturn is about. And a lot of times Saturn, if there's a structure in your life that's not serving you, it may shake up that structure, whether that be being married or in a job that is no longer serving you, or if you haven't taken care of yourself, it can even be health matters as well.
Again, understanding that there are limits and taking a step back so you're not so much on the edge. And many times we see, coincidentally speaking, at the first Saturn return, people overexceed their limits. They don't know that there are limits to life. How many entertainers and people in the music industry, Jimi Hendrix, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stone, Janis Joplin, die right around their Saturn return because in terms of, I just want to say, the drug addiction, there's limits to overdosing, and the people don't intentionally overdose, but there is a limit, and when you exceed that limit, Saturn is very cruel because there is, as I said, it's not suspended for you.
Well,
so our ability to deal with those limits is a lot of whether, you get the proverbial grapes or the decanter of sour grapes.
Well, even if you look at a recent example of Robin Williams, he was just turning right at 60, I believe, 61, and he just wasn't able to handle life. Whatever reason it was that he decided to take his life. I know he was beginning the first stages of Parkinson's disease. Whether or not that was a reason for him to do what he did, I don't know. But it's about going with the flow. It's about understanding who you are and understanding life changes, and there's some things that you don't have control over, and you have to just manage your life as opposed to just completely going in a different direction. So this kind of sets us up, like I say, for understanding what's going to happen next year, and there's other planets to consider as well, and I know that you'll talk to us about that, but it's always interesting to see where Saturn is because it gives you clues. And it's like you said that Saturn just moved into a different constellation. It just moved into Scorpio. So some people are feeling a little bit of relief because it's moved into a different constellation, and other people are starting to feel, if you want to call it, pressure. Because they are now being challenged. They are now having to recognize certain things in life that they may have taken for granted, but now they actually have to deal with it. So
Saturn's going to be coming to a sign near you soon.
That's right.
to basically visit you and show you how things really are, and he's going to have left someone else's sign or constellation, and they're going to have been awakened to the way things really are. If they're able to accept that, then they're going to come to a sense of peace. If they can't, there's going to be the sour grapes. Sour grapes can be very motivating to change our lives.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to take a brief break, so please stay with us here on EPIC Voyagers Radio, here on the Inception Radio Network. I'm your guest host tonight, John Cappello. We'll be right back. Okay, well, welcome back to EPIC Voyagers Radio here on the Inception Radio Network. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're just about ready to go into 2015, and we have with us tonight Dennis Flaherty, who is the president of the Council of Vedic Astrologers. My name is John Cappello, and I'm a psychic medium from the North Texas area. And just a little bit about what I do. I travel around the United States, and I go to different metaphysical stores and different cities demonstrating my work. And if you'd like to go to my website to see more about my work and who I am, you can just go to www.johncappello.com, and you can check my schedule. Hopefully I'll be in a town near you soon. I am the author of a book called Open the Mind, Exercise the Soul. You can find the book on Amazon and all other book-selling websites if you'd like to purchase it. I'd be delighted if you did that. I'll have some other books coming out soon, sometime in 2015, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you about those when they do. Also, I'd like to welcome our listeners on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We appreciate you listening to our program and listening to EPIC Voyagers every Monday night. EPIC Voyagers is the Extraordinary Paranormal Investigations Council. So if you think you've seen a UFO, or you've seen Bigfoot, or you have seen something that just didn't appear right, give us a call, and we will try to get get one of our investigators out there to check out the phenomena, because that's what we do. We're interested in those things that are paranormal, things the scientific community may not accept at this time, but it's got to start somewhere, and it starts with people making observations about unusual things, and we're with you on that, because we think there's more out there than what the scientific community may acknowledge at this particular time. So we are delighted once again to have you. If you're downloading this program, we want to thank you for doing that as well. And we, like I say, are here every Monday night with a different guest host. I show up every once in a while, and I try to have topics that I think that you might be interested in learning about. And because we are starting the new year, I thought that we would take a different perspective of it, because as a psychic, people always want to hear what I have to say about the new year. But I'm also a little bit of an astrologer, so I get a little bit of a heads up by seeing where the planets are. And I wanted to introduce the audience to a very good friend of mine, Dennis Flaherty. He's been kind enough to join us this evening. And as we were saying, Dennis is the president of the Council of Vedic Astrologers. He's really one of the pioneers of Vedic astrology in the United States. And I'm going to bring him back on here in just a moment, but I want him to give us his phone number and website right now so that you can write that down. We're going to repeat it again, but we want you to write it down now so that if you want to contact Dennis, you can do so. He's an excellent Vedic astrologer. He can give you a lot of insight into your life, and Vedic astrology is so exacting, and it's one of the things that has impressed me about it. It's just something that I don't have the time to devote my entire life to, but because I do my psychic work. But it is just amazing, just an amazing piece of work that if you do have an interest in astrology, learn as much as you can. You can learn the Western, but if you have a chance to really look at the Eastern astrology, it is just wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Dennis back in and have him give us some information about himself, and then we're going to talk about 2015. And I know that all of you've been waiting for that information. So Dennis, are you there?
Yes, I am, John. Thank you.
Well, thanks for staying with us this evening. Can you let people know how to reach you? I'd like to do that at this time. I want to make sure we get it in, and then we'll reaffirm it again near the end of the program.
Yes, for a personal consultation, you can reach my reception at area code 425-778-6487. You just need to Google Dennis Flaherty, and I am on the first page. There's myself, the photographer, and the chief of police, and you'll be able to discern my website from the others. And our website can be reached at www.vedic, V-E-D-I-C, Sciences, S-C-I-E-N-C-E-S, all one word, and you can see a list of my services, and also it will explain my approach to astrology and the various kinds of consultations that I do. So if you want to book a consultation, call reception. If you want to find out information about astrology and Vedic astrology and more about it and the kind of consultations I do, you can Google my website.
Well, very good. Well, in the first hour, Dennis, what I was trying to do and what you were so eloquent in saying was kind of a setup of Vedic astrology, what it's about, the value of Vedic astrology, its history, letting people know that this is something which is grounded in centuries of observation. And the ancients had a way of explaining the world, and they did it through astrology. And this is a system that is parallels or coincides with the Hindu religion. And it's something that's very near and dear to the Indian people, and so it's revered by them and respected by them. And we talked a little bit about how a birth chart kind of gives people tools to deal with issues that may come forth in their life. And one of the things that we talk about as astrologers, at least Western astrology, we use the term transits, and because the birth chart is just a picture of time, a moment in time when we were actually born. And what happens is the universe continues to move and continues to manifest itself, and so we basically take these tools that we're born with, and we forage in our lives. We move forward in life with those tools, and battle the issues that we need to battle as we move along to the time that we move or transition into the spirit world. And so what we're doing is we're going into this new period of 2015, and of course we were talking about how December is really the 10th month of the year, January is the 11th month of the year, but we call it the first of the year. And we are noticing some changes going on right now, and we talked a little bit about that in the last hour, where Saturn moved into a different constellation in the Eastern system. It's moving into another constellation in the Western system as well. It's moving into Sagittarius. It's moving into the sign of Sagittarius, and so it's going to be affecting a lot of the mutable signs. And I'm already getting readings from people in the mutable signs, but because they're noticing that change is happening in their life, and they've got to make some decisions. So what I'd like for you to do is, if you could talk a little bit about maybe President Obama, the United States, the economy, maybe the stock market. We mentioned Russia just briefly. I don't know if you have any comments about the country of Russia this coming year, but if you do, go ahead and let us know, and just kind of an overview of 2015. And we talked a little bit about Saturn, but I know that you may have some other planets that you may want to talk about in reference to what they'll be doing in 2015. So I'm just going to kind of let you take over. I may interrupt you a little bit if I have a question, but please just let us know what you're predicting or what you see as potential events or things that could happen for 2015.
Certainly, it'd be my pleasure. As I said earlier, the study of astrology is really the study of time, and remember, not all time is equal. And just like we have different ways to break down time, and a lot of it is, I want to say, astrologically oriented. The planets of social drama that have to do with our path and purpose in the world are Saturn and Jupiter. Both Vedic and Western astrologers look at Saturn and Jupiter, and Saturn and Jupiter have a 20-year dance, which is every 20 years they can join and come together. And we have said that that's kind of indicative of a generation. So we can look at things generationally about every 20 years, to look at different generations, whether they're baby boomers, the silent majority, Gen X. We have a way of breaking down people according to their generation, according to the time in which they were born. And just like we can break, a year down into a season, and we can break it down into a month and a day, we can also break down time. And so to look at 2015, I'm going to look at that year, in our Gregorian calendar, which is from January 1st to January 1st, and I'm going to see where certain planets are. And in the astrology of India, just like in the astrology of West, the planets that reflect the spectrum of white light the best in the night sky are considered to be benefic because they give light, and where there is light, we can see things clearly for what they are. The planets that are limited in light are considered not to be benefic but to be challenging. And basically, there's 9 planets in Indian astrology. The sun is the source of light. So the sun is the giver of life itself. I mean, none of the planets have their own light. They have the light reflected from the sun. So the planets that reflect the light of the sun the best in the night sky. There's 4 of them are considered to be benefic, and the planets that do a bad job of reflecting that light are considered to be malefic. So we kind of want to see in that balance, when do the forces of light reign and when do the forces of darkness reign?
Well, now Jupiter is considered a benefic planet, and Saturn, is that malefic?
Saturn is generally malefic from a general point of view because his light is very limited, and you're looking at something through a glass darkly. So that's why he's kind of indicative of that pessimistic quality, because you're looking at it kind of in limited light. Jupiter reflects the spectrum of white light consistently the best in the night sky. It's no coincidence that that's the planet that Galileo saw that set Western theology on its end, and got them into the perspective of a heliocentric or a sun-centered universe, because with his telescope he was able to see Jupiter. And he had a fantastic Jupiter in his chart. So actually, the principal planet of light for Galileo got Western astronomers and theology out of the Aristotelian view of a perfect universe where everything was really perfect, and then when he was able to use his telescope to look at the sun, and see its reflection on a piece of paper and see sunspots, the immutable, eternal perfected sun paradigm went down the drain with that, and as with all people, no good deed goes unpunished. Everybody was invested in a very different theology, so very fortunate for Galileo that he was the bringer of the light, because he saw Jupiter, but he paid a heavy price for it.
Well, now, the one thing that I wanted to ask you is that just because something may be considered benefic, it doesn't necessarily, it can always mean that it's positive. There can be some negative aspects to being a benefic planet, and there can be some positive aspects to what you would call a malefic planet if you use the energy correctly. Is that right?
Very, very well said. No planet is completely bad or completely good. In fact, most businesses actually fail through actually overgrowth, not undergrowth. So that's the trouble with Jupiter, because Jupiter can lead to unbridled optimism, and then just again investing in that. And Saturn's positive quality is one of self-restraint and working within the limits, and his negative quality is fear, not even trying. So every planet has a good or a good or a bad quality, generally speaking. Light is indicative of growth. So again, understand in the Indian calendar, we're looking at the garden of life. In the summer, we're planting our seeds, and everything we're planting is growing. Now, you can plant some weeds at that period of time, and they'll grow too, so you have to be discriminate in what you're planting. Saturn is a very powerful principle that a lot of people don't understand in the dark part of the year. The dark part of the year is about deconstruction. And remember what the great scientist Albert Einstein said. He said in his equals MC square, no energy in the universe is lost or created. It's caught up in certain constructs. And when those constructs deconstruct or degrade in a rhythmic manner, in essence, they release the energy that's inherent in them. That's what's behind nuclear fission and harvesting the deconstruction of the atom. So the positive element of Saturn is if you're trapped in certain constructs that you don't want to be in essence, when Saturn comes, those will deconstruct, those will degrade, and you will be liberated from that. So Saturn plays a great role in liberation. You look at people, for example, that have been imprisoned in an unhappy relationship and an unhappy job, and that will deconstruct over a period of time. So his positive element is that you can get liberated or deconstructed, which is a positive element. Something is deconstructing, but you're being liberated from it. You're free. That's his positive element. And the negative element of Jupiter is you might not be a wise planter, and you may plant some really lousy seeds that come to bloom in a certain period of time that don't do you really any good.
So with Saturn, let's just, I guess, talk about Saturn first. With Saturn going into the constellation of Scorpio, how will this affect us next year? With specifically, I guess let's take President Obama. What kind of year do you anticipate him having? Because last year with him losing Congress, that couldn't have been good for him.
Well, President Obama in Indian astrology is ruled by Saturn. And for his second term, he had entered Saturn's cycle very profoundly. And so in essence, many of us predicted that he would win his second term, and he won the second term. Now, in essence, that he's lost the House and he's lost the Senate. He's a lame duck. And basically, I think he's appearing on that TV show, The Biggest Loser, which is once you've lost all of this, what more do you have to lose? So actually, he's encouraged to kind of act unilaterally to do everything he wants as a lame duck, which is where the power is with the lame duck, because he's come to the limit of his term. He can't run for another term if he wants to. So in essence, I mean, he has nothing left to lose, so he is going to act kind of unilaterally, within the limits that have been imposed upon him, because he can't run for another term. Now, beyond politics, so to speak, one of the things that we look at is, whether we're Eastern or Western astrologers, we want to look at planets in certain elements. And we're going to find in Eastern astrology that Saturn has entered a water constellation. And for the first half of the year, Jupiter is going to be in a water constellation, and another challenging planet, which is the south node of the moon of Ketu, is going to be in a water constellation. Now, Saturn comes to a water constellation every 10 years. And so I want to go back 10 years to December of 2004? And there are water issues that are going to emerge. Remember 10 years ago, 2004, the tsunami? The tsunami
Yes.
that hit Thailand, which is a major water issue, killed over 250,000 people. So the issue is there are going to be water issues. As a classic malefic planet, remember, Saturn shows the limits. There are going to be issues of limits around water. In terms of limits around clean water. Clean water is becoming more of a resource than, I want to say, availability of oil. And I will come to oil, where Saturn was basically, 30 years ago, that pretty much crashed the oil markets at that period of time, that had great effects for oil-producing countries and had great effects for our part of the country, particularly Texas, where you were, if you remember, down in Houston in the mid-'80s, and the oil-producing region in the Gulf. These people's budgets were deeply limited and challenged because there's even limits to the price of oil. So we can look at the collapse of oil that happened 30 years ago. But first I want to look at water. So I am concerned about availability of clean water. I am concerned about pollution within water. And I also am concerned, because of the predominance of planets in water constellations, that there will be water issues. We know with global warming, the scientists are telling us, that the ice sheets are melting, that water is changing in many different areas. Patterns of water distribution are changing that are bringing flooding to certain areas and drought to other areas, like Southern California. And wherever there is going to be drought, there is going to be a fire threat. My state, which is the state of Washington, has had extreme water. So we have had flooding and landslides that have become destabilized by a change in weather patterns, because what Saturn is showing us is the weather pattern that maybe we've been used to for maybe even 30 years. We might think it's always going to be that way. And again, change is afoot. So I have concerns about availability of clean water. I have issues around water rights, and I'm also going to have issues around pollution of the world's oceans, not from just, the nuclear accident like, Fukushima that happened, but in essence, the ability of the oceans to accept the pollution, to accept the acid that has been associated with everything that's been dumped into it, kind of the element of saturation. So I'm going to see issues with marine life. I think people that have looked at, for example, authors like Amy Klein's, capitalism versus sustainability, is that the ability, very much from a scientific point of view, there is like a mass extinction that's happening to many different qualities, not only of marine life, but life is disappearing due to our overpopulation, because every 12 years now, which is about a Jupiter return, the population of the world increases by 1 billion people. And so that pushes other species out, that pushes our agenda. And that might be good for us, but it's not good for other species. So just seeing the limits, and particularly I want to say the resource of water, and again, whether it's fracking, whether it's pollution of the ocean, whether it's the struggle over water rights between various states, etc., we are going to see issues with water. When are the issues more likely to manifest? Well, they're more likely to manifest under the eclipses, because the nature of eclipses are storm planets. And for those people that use the outer planet Uranus, the planet Uranus in the Indian system of astrology is in a water constellation, and it is with one of the storm planets, which is known as the south node of the moon. So we're going to have eclipses that are going to be happening right around the spring equinox. March 20th is going to be the first eclipse that we are going to experience, and it's going to be what we call very much a K2 eclipse. K2 has to do with loss and letting go.
Well, let me ask you this. Katrina, I believe, was in 2005. Are we going to be expecting some major storms?
Well, whatever name we want to give to it, it's going to be kind of associated with flooding, and it's going to be associated with water. And, when you get this wind-driven water, and you get these water funnels, which are tornadoes over water, in essence, you have this storm surge, and it's the storm surge that creates the challenge. It's the storm surge of a tsunami that comes from an earthquake. But, a wind-driven storm, in essence, of that, you don't have to be an astrologer to know with global warming that the storms are becoming more extreme. So the concerns I'm going to see around that are going to be more during a preponderance of planets and water constellations, and particularly a preponderance of what we call planets that are malefic. Mars is going to enter a water constellation, the water constellation of Pisces. He is going to enter it about the middle of, he's going to enter it about the 12th of February, and he doesn't really leave the water constellation until pretty much the end of March. So just I want to say from about with Mars being in a water constellation, Saturn being in a water constellation, Uranus being in a water constellation, the south node of the moon being in a water constellation, I'm going to have concern about heavy snow, heavy flooding, water issues, depending on whether you're north or south of the equator, whether it's going to be snowing for you or it's going to be flooding. I'm going to have some sense of destabilization around that from about the second half of February to, in essence, until we hit these eclipses about March 20th. Now, I want to be clear, this is, I'm not a doomsayer here, okay? I'm talking about trends. And the good news in this is that the planet of the greatest light, which is Jupiter, is also in a water constellation, very powerful. When light is shone on a situation, light has an incredible influence because we can see what is going on. That was in the dark is now in the light. So with the power of Jupiter, I believe if there are tsunamis, there is going to be a warning system in place that will allow people to prepare. Many people, as a result of Thailand's tsunami, there are warning systems in advance. Secondly, we're going to see warning as far as weather is concerned, because with global warming, there is much more forecast around these storms and preparations around these storms. So even though these storms may be coming and the nature of a storm is unpredictable, I'm going to see with the power of Jupiter that people will be prepared. People are prepared for this because of the events that we have experienced in the past. So that's the good news of Jupiter. So although there's a gathering of challenging planets and water constellations, the great Jupiter is there. And being there, he mitigates to a great extent because that takes place in the dark can no longer take place in the dark once the light has changed, has shone. Photosynthesis changes everything. So although there are, again, the difficult planets are lining up, more specifically second half of February to the end of March, the great Jupiter there is also shining his light. So we kind of have this balance, if you will. And many times, even though difficulty may present itself, if we have the consciousness and light of reason to look at it, we're able to mitigate it. The issue is many times when the difficulty takes us by surprise, and we're not prepared, as with the great tsunami of 2004. So whatever water issues that are going to be out there, whether it's flooding, whether it's a tsunami, again, whether it's severe storms, with the grace of Jupiter, I'm going to see a lot of preparation around that.
So the end of winter, beginning of spring is maybe a tumultuous time with storms that may involve water, snow, blizzards, or things of that nature, something of that nature?
Yes, it's water-based phenomena, and even to a certain extent pollution of water, and even from our point of view, water-based disease. So in essence, people may see that their quality of water has degraded or whatnot. There might be warnings to boil it, water scarcity, issues around availability of clean water, etc. And in areas that there has been extensive globalization like China, again, do not allow as much publicity as we do. These things might be going on, but, we may hear about them secondhand.
We hear about them after there's a tragedy. So.
Correct.
But what about the stock market? They're predicting the stock market is going to go up about 10 to 12% next year. Do you see it that way, or do you have anything that you would recommend people to do? Stocks, bonds, or precious metals? Anything that is illuminated by what's going to be happening next year?
I am not a financially oriented astrologer. That is a certain specialty that I choose not to become involved in. In fact, when many people ask me about finances, I give them my new joke, which is, what do you get when you cross a financial advisor with the Godfather? And the punchline is someone who makes you an offer you can't understand. When it comes to the so-called stock market, it is not indicative of the economy overall. It is indicative of the stock market. And I will turn to that in a moment, because the stock market is about the personification of materiality. I mean, the goal of the stock market is the goal of money, and if you will, the goal of greed. So the stock market tends to express itself in greed and fear, right?
Right.
That's what tends to drive it. It's quite extreme, and I will talk about it because just like we can do the chart of an individual, we also can do the charts of nations. So in the chart of the United States of America, we were born on July 14th, 1776. The United States is going to go through a big cycle shift this year in September.
July 14th or July 14th or July 4th?
July 4th. July 4th. Yeah, not July 14th.
Yeah. You're changing history.
I'm sorry, that's not my goal. If I misspoke, it's July 4th. It's okay. July 4th. We all know that one, born on the 4th of July.
Right.
I will talk about that, and I will talk about the stock market. But the other piece that I want to talk about is there's two planetary configurations that I'm concerned with. They will blow out, though, as we kind of come to the middle of February. When planets are in each other's constellations, they become linked with one another. It's called Parivartana Yoga in Indian astrology. It's called mutual reception in Western astrology. So Saturn is in Mars's constellation of Scorpio, because in Indian astrology, Scorpio is ruled by Mars. It's his wet constellation. And Mars is traveling through Saturn's constellations. He is He is currently in the constellation of Capricorn. Around the 4th of January, he'll enter into Aquarius. So he and Saturn are in each other's constellations. And there's inherent frustration between the two of them because, as we like to say, it's best expressed in Mars wants what he wants, preferably yesterday, and Saturn delivers tomorrow. So there's a great deal of frustration inherent in that. You're going to see that frustration in civil unrest as it has expressed itself in the last month and will continue to do for the next 6 weeks. So you're just seeing people really entrenched in terms of civil unrest. So I'm going to see a continuation of civil unrest. Mars is indicative of law enforcement. It's indicative of the military, and we see the challenges that the military and law enforcement are having to deal with this particular time. We've seen we have seen the struggles between both of them at this period of time. So people within law enforcement consider themselves to be basically besieged, and in essence, people in the public also consider themselves to be besieged as well. Now, I'm going to have. Yeah, so I want to continue to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just with Saturn going into the new constellation, and with Jupiter, I believe Jupiter right now is in the constellation of Cancer in the Eastern system, which would put it in water. And
Jupiter is in water, and that's the saving grace. That's the saving grace because the constellation of Cancer is related to home and family. So people have a strong sense of support and emotional support. But we're going to see some civil unrest simply because of, the role that the military has had just in terms of the Middle East and the forever wars. I mean, it's hard for many Americans to believe that, we've been in Afghanistan longer than the Soviets. I mean, you could take those old Sylvester Stallone films, okay? And he was fighting in Afghanistan, and you could just
Rambo.
do flip-flop as Rambo because we've actually been longer in Afghanistan than the Soviets were. So in essence, I'm going to see some challenges around that. But Scorpio is also intensely private. So we're going to see issues around civil liberties and the invasion of privacy that marry Americans as far as their civil liberties are concerned. This issue will be raised in terms of privacy issues, and I want to say the invasiveness of government with their securitization programs, business with their securitization programs, where in essence, whether it's people's phone calls, whether it's their internet, whether, it's the surveillance systems in the smart meters, whatever has been put into their automobiles, we're going to see that kind of rear its head because the civil liberties issues of the United States are very much founded on that freedom and the Freedom of Information Act. And again, it makes no difference, again, whether it was a Republican regime or whether it was a Democratic regime. But Mr. Snowden, who, as he had, Saturn go over his moon, he was the one that kind of broke last year that, in essence, the surveillance that the United States was not only leveraging against its own people, but on people abroad. So we're going to see those issues, I believe, become very important issues as far as politics are concerned, because Saturn is deeply private, and where that privacy, I want to say, has been perceived, has been violated, whether it's for national security or not, you're going to see those issues rear their head.
Okay. Well, it just seems that, we're going to have another year of change, but is the economy going to be doing better, or is it just going to be stagnant, or how do you see that?
Well, again, I think it was Mark Twain who said that I really love change, but I prefer large denominational bills. Because to talk about the economy overall from a Vedic perspective, the United States is going to shift from the cycle of Mars into the cycle of Rahu, the north node of the moon. The United States has been in the cycle of Mars basically since 2008. And many people had thought when this democratic, peace-loving president, Barack Obama, came to power, that in essence he would end the war and the conflict overseas. And in fact, it has not ended. We are still in Afghanistan, and we have boots on the ground again in Iraq. So many Vedic astrologers, particularly Chakrapani Ulal, spoke on this back in 2008, that war would continue because Mars is in the part of the chart that's associated with conflict. We're going to come into Rahu, and Rahu is with the planet Mercury in the chart of the United States. And this is going to be a big planetary shift because, to put this into perspective, the United States was born on July 4th, 1776, in the cycle of Rahu. And we have not been in the cycle of Rahu for 120 years. So I can go back to having been born into this cycle of a turbulent planet. And what was the issue back in founding of this great nation was the taxation without representation. It was that quality of being the vassal of Great Britain that led to us wanting to have, death or liberty and to be able to chart our own future. So we were born out of that in turbulent relationship when we separated from Great Britain. If we want to go back 120 years from now, this is going to take us to about 1895, and this was the era of the great robber barons at that period of time that basically stripped resources and made an incredible amount of money in terms of what we would call inequity. So what I'm going to see with Rahu coming to this placement is I'm going to really be seeing the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. And I'm going to see some fermenting of inequity at this period of time. And if you will look at today's large monopolistic corporations that are multinationals and the amount of money that they're pouring into politics, we can see with the money that they put into this last election, many people have said, it's the best democracy that money can buy. And secondarily, this amount of money is going to influence the next politics. So many people are concerned about what we're going to say undue corporate influence, undue money, and again, for the people that have the money, it's going to get better. And for people that don't have the money, it's going to get worse because there's only so much out there, and when people have a bigger share, other people don't. I think we all know the statistics and the litany of, the current, mega wealth family. The Waltons own more money, than the 40% of the bottom rung of the socioeconomic ladder of the United States. So I'm going to see this inequity take place. But just like there was a rebellion, I want to say, against the inequity that the British imposed, and just like the inequity that the robber barons eventually, there were clawbacks on that. I mean, just remember that it was under Woodrow Wilson's regime that basically Standard Oil was broken up, into many different constituent parts, so they no longer had a monopoly. You're going to see more monopolizations in Rahu. So in reference to the stock market, I want to say that people that are probably in the stock market are going to do better, but because Rahu is a storm planet, and particularly when the planet of business, Mercury, lines up with Rahu, again, the market is volatile. Rahu lined up with Mercury last late September and October, and we saw the volatile stock market at that period of time. Mercury is free of Rahu right now, and so we see the market going onward and upward. But just remember, this is a moment in time. It's kind of like a transit. The stock market can be up in a moment, but in a moment it can be down. And if you can't weather it and you can't hold on, one day you can be a rich man, and next day you can be a poor man.
So you don't see a type of crash like a 1929 crash or even a 2008 crash or anything, do you? You just see it because for people that don't know, Rahu is the if you want to call it the planet of chaos, And
Rahu is the north node of the moon, and he is the planet of materialism in Indian astrology. And we have a Mercury-Rahu combination in the chart of the United States. Great financiers like J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers have Rahu Mercury. It is about making money. Rahu at its worst is really about greed. I mean, it's accumulation for the sake of accumulation. And so again, the concern is we come into Rahu, and Rahu's in the 8th part of the chart that's associated with bankruptcy. I think the general concern is this that I can lay out. Whatever euphemism people want to call the downturn that happened in 2008. In essence, the issue was the whole collapse of the banking system was pumped up by the U.S. government and taxpayers' dollars. And the bailout, I mean, was very, very extreme. But in light of that, if we want to look at this last administration since 2008, we saw how fragile the economy was as the Bush administration left and the Obama administration came in, and basically through government bailouts, these industries were saved, they were turned around. Many people had spoke about inflation coming in, but that inflation did not, in fact, present itself. In fact, what presented itself, other than, I want to say, oil, food, and energy. I mean, overall, and the stock market, there was no inflation. The challenge of no inflation from an economic point of view means that the people that didn't get bailouts, unless you had a corporation or you got a government handout, those people had debt. And with no inflation, or in fact deflation, their debt was going to actually be more because they couldn't grow out of their debt. So what you really had is a lot of people that had debt and they had no hope of getting out of that debt, by paying it back with inflated dollars. Yeah. So they couldn't get out of debt, and many of them had to bankrupt, and lo and behold, the bankruptcy laws had progressively been changed from that period of time. So we know there's a lot of resentment around certain people that were in that position and didn't really feel the goal of government was to help people. They didn't get helped. Again, we know the euphemism was that Wall Street got helped and Main Street did not. Now, I
think the term was got the shaft.
I think economists like Paul Krugman said, heads I win, tails you lose, which is I'm going to reap the profits, but you're going to take the loss.
Right.
Now, again, unlike the Great Depression that brought in what was called the Glass-Steagall Act, that limited the role of banks to just be savings and loans, they made them dumb and dumber businesses so that, again, there couldn't be a collapse. People were indicted. There was a lot of protectionism. No one was seriously indicted, and there was no new Glass-Steagall that came out. There was the Dodd-Frank bill that came out, and already Wall Street has poured money into Congress. So right before they went on recess, they tried to gut and did gut parts of the Dodd-Frank bill, so that now banks can go back to gambling. And going back to gambling they will, because there really is nothing to prevent them from doing that. And if their lobbyists can further gut regulation, in essence, we can return to the same principles where banks will not have reserves, and there is a possibility that, again, in global markets they can go south.
So we're kind of setting the stage for the next recession, which is down the road a little while. So we're going to have probably a little bit of a boom or risk taking, if you want to call it that, in the next year or so, or maybe even for the next few years before we create another bubble and we have another.
The banks are going to. I mean, if the banks can become the casinos that they were before, they'll continue, to leverage and gamble and speculate, knowing that last time the government bailed them out, and, in all speculation, knowing this time that the government will probably do that again for them. So they're going to continue to do what they've continued to do. Just the other piece, though, is we want to look back, basically 30 years, to see the major decline in oil, because remember, Saturn was in the constellation of Scorpio from December of 84 to December of 87, a lot of people hedged on oil. And as a result of that, they lost a lot of money. Many people believed that the price of oil was going to go onward and upward. What happened to the last time oil crashed? Remember in the Great Recession of 2008 and 9, oil in the month, I think, of June of 2008, or maybe a little earlier, was about $50 a barrel, and it completely crashed right before the elections. And then, of course, it was followed by, a collapse in banking. So depending on where people are in oil, I mean, the price of oil for your average consumer, because, of course, it's going to save them on transportation, it's going to save them on shipping. Imagine what it's going to do for the post office in terms of fueling their vehicles. I mean, the post office might actually become solvent. Because oil has dropped dramatically. But for all of those people that invested in shale and in oil or whatnot, in the global market right now, in the words of the great Yogi Berra, hey, the future of oil ain't what it used to be. There's a lot of people that thought that oil would continue. So understand, as we come to the first of the year, and as we come into next year, oil may continue to fall. And, the last time oil fell kind of dramatically was followed by a recession. I have more concerns a couple of more years down the road as we come into Rahu, and I will list those concerns from a point of view of the study of cycles. The planet of growth is Jupiter. And Jupiter achieves his greatest status in the constellation of Cancer, which represents the summer solstice. And, in fact, they've done a lot of work and research on Stonehenge, and they found out that it was a summer solstice fertility festival, because if you wanted to conceive a child, you would go to Stonehenge during the summer solstice. You would have the ripe fruit of summer for your first trimester, the harvest for your second, and the baby was born in the spring. The garden of life is alive and well while Jupiter is strong. We get concerned when Jupiter goes to debilitation or weakness, when he goes to the winter constellation, the winter solstice, Capricorn. When he's in that position, that's when we get concerned. He goes there every 12 years. Just in recent history, Jupiter was in the winter constellation of Capricorn in 1997. Paul Krugman, the economist from the New York Times, wrote Depression-era economics, because remember the Asian contagion that started in Thailand and it influenced all sorts of currencies? There was a mini recession at that period of time. Add 12 to 1997, and you are going to get 2009. Jupiter again was debilitated and eclipsed in January of 2009, and we all know the great, great recession that we have lived through.
Are you expecting some changes in currencies? I know we've seen the Russian ruble fall dramatically. Do you see other currencies being affected?
Well, in essence, if people have been basing their economy on oil, and the price of oil is down right now, whether you're a state or a government, your budgets are going to hell in a handbasket. And for all of those people that hedge currency, in essence, they're going to continue to hedge that. So that's why the Russian ruble has suddenly dropped, because of the dependence of the budget on oil. And what's bad for the Soviet Union, is good for everybody driving SUVs, because everybody went out and bought a new SUV.
Yeah, that's what they did in Russia. They bought cars and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to go out and buy things because the price of oil is down, and even in U.S. consumers, there's been a return to SUVs. Smaller SUVs, because people forget, again, they might think that it's always going to be down this low, but it's not going to be down this low. So I'm not going to see, from my point of view as an astrologer, economic collapse this year of 2015 coming. Not at all. I actually believe that it'll be a bit of a growth year. The last time Jupiter was exalted, which was the summer of 2002 to 2003, the real estate market in the United States took off, and it was a bit of a boom. What I am concerned about 2020. Because Jupiter will again become debilitated. We will be in the cycle of Rahu, and we're ultimately going to have to see where banking is going to go. And remember that at the midterms, big money bought this election. Doesn't make any difference if they're Democrats or Republicans, but they're going to push their agenda. And understand, right before Congress went on vacation, there was a whole issue in the budget, which a lot of it had to do with doing favors and suspending regulation for Wall Street. So if big money, through lack of finance reform, is going to influence government, voters are not going to turn out. This last election, 32%, 33%, one-third of the people voted. So it was not a mandate of the people, it was big money, and this big money is going to influence the next election. So whoever we get in the next election, which is going to be 2016, I am concerned about that period of 2016 to the period to 2020, just like when we saw, President Bush get elected for his second term. There was all sorts of money that was given away. Particularly in his first term, it's hard to believe that we actually were a creditor nation. At the end, we're in a debtor nation. And look at the very end of Mr. Bush's presidency, where even Mr. McCain didn't want to embrace him at the end of that period of time. So my concern is more down the road of 2020.
Do you see any particular person rising that we should be on the lookout for as far as 2016 is concerned?
We should look at a person who big money is going to put in office, which is who's ever got the best PAC and who's ever got the best big bucks basically representing them will be in office. So it will be an election that money will buy, and maybe hopefully out of that will come campaign reform, because then again, it's not really an election of everybody has an equal chance. Certain candidates are have money, have deep pockets, and we know how much it takes to run for office these days. You have to really have big money behind you.
Yeah,
Makes
that's
no
true.
difference whether you're a Democrat or Republican. But hopefully just seeing that big money is about big money, the inequity is going to grow, the rich are going to get rich, the poor are going to get poorer, until finally, again, there is some kind of a watershed event, some kind of a crisis. And I'm more concerned about that bubble bursting more down the road as we're going to be coming to the 2020 election. That's my concern just in the long run. But I think there are going to be speed bumps this year, but overall I think the U.S. economy is well situated. The U.S. dollar is strong. And I will certainly expect the oil lobby, to get some special favors while oil is down right now.
Well, do you see? How do you see Europe and the Middle East and Russia? We only have a few minutes left, and do you see things getting better in Iraq, and do you see the European economy getting better?
I think the rise of China in a global world has had a great impact upon Europe. And I think Europe is going to be struggling with being on the verge of recession. I'm going to see that continue. In essence, it's an easy prediction, but I'm going to see continued conflict in the Middle East. In essence, understand we've been at war in Afghanistan for 13 years right now.
13 years,
not yet out of the cycle of Mars. So I'm going to actually see the conflict there. It's not going to be voted on by Congress. It's going to be political in terms of just like Libya. But I'm going to see the conflict and the destabilization in the Middle East continue to take place. And I think, at least for the first 6 months, I think we're going to see a continued decline in oil. That continued decline in oil is already having a dramatic destabilizing effect on oil-producing nations that are highly dependent on that, and those just happen to be America's competitors and enemies at this point, Venezuela, Iran, and the Soviet Union. So the issue is, if you knew you were destabilizing their government by keeping oil, really low, and you were able to build up extraordinary reserves because we're one of the greatest producing oil countries right now, really. Just in terms of the shale production and all of that, we actually are on the verge of independence.
Right.
Imagine if we stopped exporting oil. Would you want to drive up the price of oil? Yes, some oil speculators might want to do that from a point of view of national security. The collapse of oil has done in Russia, has done in Iran, and has done in Venezuela. But the CIA has nothing to do with
nothing to do with it. Well, Dennis, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We're getting close to ending the program, but before I do, can you please give us your phone number again? What do you buy? Do you mind telling people what you charge for a reading?
Oh, it's on my website.
Okay.
My consultations are $175.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as opposed to these predictions from a geopolitical point of view, my prognostications and trends are from a personal point of view. I don't talk politics.
Okay, no, I understand.
So yeah,
but
we at 425-778-6487, and you'll get a reception, and they'll get you into my schedule, or you can get my website at VedicSciences.com. Vedic. And you'll be able to read various articles, etc.
Well,
I
with
hope
that,
I've done a little bit of the Vedic view.
Yes. Well, with that, we're going to once again thank you for being a part of EPIC Voyagers Radio. We appreciate it, and we hope to have you come back as a guest. And we appreciate all of our listeners. We hope everyone has a happy and safe New Year. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. My name is John Cappello, and I'm a psychic medium from North Texas. Visit my website, johncappello.com. And with that, we wish you a happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's EPIC Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for EPIC. Until next time.